without further ado, I'm going to invite Dr. Griffin from University of Warwick to speak with us today. She's done some really interesting work, not just sort of developing or designing programs that get evaluated to benefit families of people with neurodevelopmental disabilities, but looking at the process of how we work with families. So our center, as people know, focuses on both people with neurodevelopmental disabilities and families. And we're always trying to figure out what's the secret sauce around how we do engagement, right? So I think we're going to learn a lot today about stuff from the UK that we can hopefully apply to our work. So without further ado, thank you for speaking with us today, and the floor is yours. And then you'll let us know when it's time for questions. We're going to go on mute in this space, but there's a whole bunch of us listening, and we're really excited.
Okay. Thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you for inviting me to be here and join you. I'm really excited as well because I've actually met some of you in person in Chicago at the IACID conference, so it's so lovely to connect. So I'm going to share my screen. So can you see that okay? Yeah. Okay, that's great. So my name's Dr. Joanna Griffin. I'm a counselling psychologist and assistant professor at the Centre for Research in Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities in the UK. And I'm also a parent caregiver. My eldest son is 17 and has cerebral palsy and intellectual disability and quite a few other diagnoses that he's kind of gathered along the way. Yeah, so I think I'm very passionate about bringing lived experience and theoretical and research all together to make the research a bit richer and more meaningful, hopefully. So in this presentation, I'm going to be talking about a project that we've been working on at Warwick on developing guidelines and a toolkit on co-production in research with family carers of people with an intellectual disability. And I just wanted to touch on the terminology. In the UK, people with lived experience tend to prefer the term learning disability, but I think that means something different in North America. And so if I say learning disability, I'm meaning intellectual disability. And this project was funded by the Participatory Research Fund at Warwick. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of background to the project, how it came about, how we had this idea. Is that we'd been involved in two co-produced interventions, one called Early Positive Approaches to Support, or EPATS, you might have heard of it, which is led by researchers Nick Gore and Jill Bradshaw at the University of Kent in the UK. And then I'd been working on a project with Professor Richard Hastings at Warwick called Positive Family Connections. And both of these were co-designed with family carers, and then they were delivered by family carers. And we felt that we were kind of learning things along the way. It would be really great to kind of document them, make sure that there's something useful comes out of sharing that, as well as connecting with other researchers working in this field. And we knew of a couple of others in the UK, the project Healthy Parent Carers and the SPACE project, which is supporting parent carers in England, both at Exeter University. So we linked up with them, and we also linked up with the Challenging Behaviour Foundation, which is a charity supporting families in the UK, and they've done a lot of work in co-production in policy and practice. So we wanted to kind of share these resources, share what we'd learned. And the co-applicants were Richard and myself from Warwick, Nick and Jill from University of Kent, and Viv Cooper, who's the chief executive from the CBF. But also many big, huge thanks to other people who were involved, including Daniel Sutherland, who's a research fellow who worked on this project with us, and Professor Chris Morris and Belle MacDonald from Exeter, and Gretchen Bjornstad as well from Exeter. And it was great to connect with they have a family faculty, so groups of families who get involved in research, and it was through them that we were able to recruit some other family carers from other projects to ensure that we really brought together a kind of breadth and depth of experience working on different projects. So that was really helpful. And I'm going to share the name, that recording again. Thank you. So I just want to recap kind of what we did and the learning along the way. And in the brackets in bold, I've kind of put how we then included what we did in the guidance that we developed. We want to develop things that would hopefully be really practical and useful for researchers, and also guidance for family carers to kind of go to if they have any questions. What should co-production, what should that look like? What can they ask? What can they expect? So there were kind of two different documents that came out of this. So we invited the 8 family carers who'd been involved in one or more of the different co-produced research projects. And then we explained for the beginning what the aims of the project were, and where there was scope to change and where there wasn't scope to change, because this whole conversation came out about some family carers being involved with some co-produced projects or even co-production with services, and feeling very much that they were brought in at the end just to tick off something that had already been decided by the researchers. And this was felt to be really quite frustrating for family carers. And we felt that it was very important to be really clear and open about what could change and what couldn't. Because obviously in research projects, sometimes there are things that are non-negotiable. But being clear about that was really important. And we explained that there'd be several meetings and they'd all be held online, and possible further work in kind of smaller working groups. And again, being clear about the time requirement and expectations. Family carers wanted that to be really clear, as well as allowing some flexibility. And we indicated that we would work around people's time and other commitments as much as we could, but there was a really tight deadline for the project, and we had to be really clear and upfront about that right from the beginning. But within that, to try and be as flexible as possible to help family carers contribute as much as they could. So we met 5 times online, and there was lots of kind of toing and froing with emails and conversations in between. The meetings were co-chaired by myself and Viv, and this was felt to be really helpful, and we included this in the guidance, that it was helpful to have chairs who had lived experience. And we ensured payment for all the family carer input, and this included the reading and preparing for meetings. It takes time to read through emails and documents and to make sure that that's all factored in for paying for family carers' time. And what was really good, important learning for me that the CBF had recommended was put in a contingency fund, because you never know when you're going to need a few extra hours here or extra meetings, and we did need that, and it was really helpful to kind of have that included in the application for the grant. And then family carers were asked how they wanted to contribute, and in terms of the kind of production of outputs or how involved they could be in writing sections of the guidance. And again, it was felt that this is useful kind of advice for other research projects, to try and allow different levels of input will enable family carers to contribute in different ways that suit them in their current situation with whatever's going on in kind of the rest of their lives. And to be flexible to the needs of family carers and the particular skills that they bring to the project. Because family carers are never just family carers, you know, we all bring lots of different experiences and hats and juggling lots of different things. And if family carers want to bring some of this other experience to co-produced projects, then this could be really, really valuable. And we certainly found that on this project. So some of the family carers wanted to write sections of the documents, but others preferred to kind of edit, or they would add little case studies or quotes that they wanted to put in. One family carer designed the material. She was an absolute whiz on Canva, so she wanted to go and design all the document, and it looks amazing. We were so pleased that she was able to do that, and we paid her for her time to do that. And then another family carer recorded videos to talk about what we were doing when we went to kind of launch some of the documents that we'd compiled during co-production week in July of this year. So what we produced and then how we shared this was discussed and agreed as a group. And in our initial application to get the grant, we gave an outline of thought of what we thought we may end up doing, but we had to say within that, there will be some flexibility because we don't know what the group are going to agree. And that was really helpful to have some of that flexibility so that discussions could be really meaningful and there were things that we could change and we could go with the things that family carers were suggesting and wanting to do. And of course, family carers were asked if they wished to be named as co-authors, which they did. But again, making sure that that input is credited, but also respecting anonymity where they don't want to be named. So some of our earliest discussions were about what is co-production, and there are so many different definitions of co-production all over the place, and we kind of talked through a few, and as a group we didn't really feel any of them were totally capturing what we were trying to do, so we thought, well, let's come up with something of our own. And I think that this still is a work in progress, and all the outputs that I'm going to talk about, they're all evolving. So we want to continue to have input and discussions with other researchers and family carers such as yourselves about what we can do to improve our kind of definitions and what's in there, make sure we've got all the kind of key points in there, but also spreading the word more widely. So please do feedback. But this is our definition at the moment. We define co-production in research as relevant stakeholders, for example, family carers, working as equal partners with researchers at the earliest stages of a project to share their lived experience. And this ensures that research is shaped around real-world experience and can make a positive difference to the lives of people with a learning disability and their families, for example, through changes to services and support. And we also talked about different stages of research. Now, obviously, research doesn't always follow this very neat linear path, but it was quite helpful to break down different stages because we wanted to discuss, are there certain stages it's particularly useful to have co-production partners, and the family carers felt very strongly that it was important to have co-production at all of these stages, which was really interesting. And I agree. I think family carers can input at all these different stages. The difficult one often is the conception. So this is the point of the idea of research, to get funding to pay for lived experience partners at that stage can be quite difficult. So that would be something that we want to raise with funders, that it's really helpful to get lived experience. Is it, as one of the family carers said, is it something meaningful to people on the ground, or is it just a researcher's pet project? And I think that's really important. Is it going to make a difference to people's kind of day-to-day life? Okay, so through all our discussions, and there was a lot of toing and froing and discussions, and then differences of opinions and trying to bring it all together, as I'm sure you can imagine, as really rich kind of discussions, they often do veer all over the place. But this is what we came up with: 7 golden rules of co-production, and then the document kind of hangs over these different golden rules. So to work together as peers, to make it meaningful, listen and keep an open mind, communicate clearly, pay appropriately, to be sensitive, and be flexible to support family carers' needs. So I'm going to go into these in a little bit more detail with these lovely slides that one of our family carers designed. So I'm very grateful to Judith for that. So working together as peers is, working together and valuing the many different skills that parents, that family carers and researchers will bring. So to kind of break that down a little bit more, a key way, this is what family carer said, this wasn't me trying to protect my own job as a family carer researcher, but a key way of demonstrating the values of an organisation or a project is to model them. And family carers felt it was really helpful that there was a family carer in a permanent or research position, and also the people with lived experience co-chairing the meetings. So it's that kind of that role modelling, the kind of ethos of an organisation or a project. Also acknowledging and harnessing the many different skills that members of the team, including family carers, can bring, and being aware of and respecting the different hats that family carers may be wearing. As I've mentioned as well about crediting authorship of outputs and recognizing that there's potential learning for everyone on the team. It's not just that family carers learn about research skills. Researchers also learn about kind of broader things for family carers and in their everyday experience. So golden rule number 2 was about making it meaningful. So this is about valuing family carer input from the start to the end and sometimes beyond, and it's not just a tick box exercise. And it was felt to be particularly meaningful if co-production is utilised at all stages of a research project. And family carers also talked about how helpful it was if they were bringing something that was going to help other family carers or make a positive contribution to the wider community that could feel really rewarding, really good for their well-being, and they were really then committed to the project. And there were benefits to researchers and the research project from involving co-production partners, but family carers also talked about personal benefits, increased confidence, increased self-esteem, and also something about using sometimes difficult experiences in their life, but in a positive way that could be really meaningful and valuable. But meaningful co-production requires adequate time and resources to do it well. And this is something that we fed back to our funders as well, that the short deadline was really, really stressful, and it was really difficult because it takes time to bring people together, to find time that they can meet and really engage with the work. So yeah, adequate time and resources, I would definitely say, is a kind of key learning. So golden rule number 3 was to listen and keep an open mind. So a non-judgmental, sensitive and transparent approach can build positive relationships across the team. And adopting an open approach can ensure meaningful contributions where people feel that they really can contribute and make a difference to the research. So being, as I mentioned before, transparent of what's already been agreed and what can change. And also being creative and constructive about differing opinions. You know, you want people with different experiences, different backgrounds to bring all their different experiences to really kind of add to this rich kind of additional meaning to what you're trying to achieve in the project. And that may mean disagreements, but that's okay. That can be a strength. That isn't necessarily a problem. So communication was really key, using plain and accessible language. The family carers really wanted to avoid acronyms and jargon. This was really interesting because I guess there's a bit of a power play there, isn't there? Or we just get used to using acronyms and don't really think about it. But I think it's really helpful to just constantly question, why are we using that? What other language could we be using instead? And to provide a clear remit and expectations of family carers to ensure you get the right people for the project, and to be clear about the aim of the research and how it will contribute to improving families' lives. So the family carers said they found it quite helpful when they received a terms of reference or something, a guideline or an outline of what the research would involve, what the expectations were on them, what the aim of the research would be, what's the time commitment, all of this in one document so they know what they're signing up for and whether they can commit to that. And explicit, we talk quite a bit in the document about explicitly outlining the value of co-production. Family carers liked hearing from researchers that they're really passionate about co-production, they're really committed, and to encourage family care reviews and kind of ground rules in meetings so that you're trying to remove some of that uncertainty if people are not feeling very confident. And pay appropriately, this was really key, to ensure that family carers are suitably compensated for their time and their expertise. So to ensure for researchers, make sure you include in the budget for the project that there's enough funding for the lived experience partners, and to consider all the hours involved. One of the family carers gave an example of a meeting they'd been involved in, and they were paid for like a 2-hour meeting, but they were sent this massive hundreds and hundreds of pages document that took about 6 hours to read, and they weren't paid for that, which feels quite unfair and quite difficult for family carers to juggle that time. Certainly in the UK, if people are paid, or even if they're given vouchers to contribute, that can affect their state benefits to kind of signpost family carers to where they get advice on that. And to include replacement care costs and travel costs if meetings are in person. And to try and keep the admin side simple. I have to say, university bureaucracy is very complex and can take time. So it could take a while to get people kind of signed up to things for some of the projects we've been involved in. But I think if you're transparent and you're clear about how long it may take, then family carers can generally kind of work with that. And again, having a contingency fund, really helpful. So golden rule number 6 was about being sensitive. So consider the well-being of family carers who contribute their lived experience, because sharing on sensitive topics, it can bring up a real variety of emotions. And it's quite important that everyone feels supported, that it's not just that family carers are expected to bare their soul and talk about sometimes really difficult things, and then it's just, right, that's the end of the meeting, goodbye. There is a bit of a duty of care to have some sensitivity, to understand where people are coming from and that things may be difficult. Kind of checking in with people at the beginning or at the end of meetings, or even just sending an email, how are you? That kind of, just sensitivity to the fact that lived experience can bring a lot of emotions as well. On to the next one. So also, family carers wanted researchers to know that your situation can suddenly change. So you may have family carers who are very involved and very responsive to replying to emails, and then suddenly things may go quiet because something's happened in their life. And family carers wanted researchers to know that sometimes there are things beyond their control that will affect how much or they can contribute and can carry on contributing. And also to be sensitive to people with their own additional needs, and to really think about what you can do, what adaptations you can make, which kind of leads on to the next golden rule, was about being flexible to support family carers' needs. Think creatively and be prepared to work in different ways to try and help work around some of the barriers that family carers may face. So this may be about their own family carers' needs. It's maybe things about when you hold meetings. So evening meetings may be helpful. Attending with cameras off may be helpful. Some people may not want to join meetings and may prefer to have contact by email or edit documents. Some people may prefer to have telephone conversations or be sent hard copies of things. So it's really just checking in with family carers, what's going to help you to contribute and make sure that your voice is heard, and having that flexibility from the research side. We also found having catch-up meetings for people was really helpful, because it was really hard to find times that everybody could make. So just being able to touch base really quickly with a family carer, saying, this is what we discussed, this was the general consensus, how do you feel about that? On a one-to-one basis was really, really useful. And acknowledging that there can be some, particular barriers that people face, including digital access of all the meetings are online. So we talked about maybe putting in the budget, paying for people to have extra data on their phone so they can join online meetings, or even loaning devices that people can use. So really thinking about how everybody can contribute. So I just want to just cover some of the kind of strengths and challenges of this particular project. The family carers were so engaged and experienced and really enthusiastic. They were so on board with doing this project, and they could see why it would be helpful. And that was just, yeah, wonderful. And also the researchers, obviously, we were all very keen and very dedicated and committed to co-production. And I think having that kind of ethos from the start, family carers pick up on that, and they kind of go with that, which is great. We did allow some flexibility within the funding for the project to change, and that was helpful because you never quite know where the meetings are going to take the project. And it helped to have 2 parent carers who were chairing and also co-applicants. Some of the challenges, it is really hard to find time that busy family carers and researchers can all meet, and especially with our really tight deadline. So as I said, we offered backup meetings and some contact by email. And we have fed back to the funder about this tight timescale because that was really difficult. And one of the family carers withdrew for a while, so making sure that you've got adequate numbers to allow for the fact that sometimes people won't be able to finish the project. But it was great that they were able to rejoin towards the end, which was really helpful. And there was a slight difference in the remit through our discussions, that the research team wanted our outputs to be really tightly defined, you know, who the target audience was. But the family carers really wanted to share more broadly. They felt this shouldn't just be for family carers in research. This could be for services more broadly, or commissioners. And it led to really helpful discussions about what are we doing now and what are the next steps. So it was a useful discussion, even though there were differences of opinion. So just briefly to talk about the outputs, we've called it a toolkit for researchers, which is available on our website, but this is going to continue to evolve. So please do add in more examples that you have or thoughts that you have that would be really valuable. And then guidance for family carers. So trying to bring together something all in one place for family carers, so they're not having to search on this website and somewhere else and in another document. We wanted to try and bring everything in one place that was easy for people to find. And then we launched some of our golden rules on social media, and we continue to develop the website and the guidance. And next steps, we have highlighted things like wanting to develop an easy read version of this, to broaden this out possibly to siblings, and to kind of connect with other projects working in the same space. So just some of the takeaways before I finish up. I think we all know, you all know, I don't need to tell you this, but family carers and researchers working together brings a really vital richness to research. There are benefits for researchers and the family carers. And it helps to have someone able to manage the pressure from both sides. Now, hopefully it doesn't feel like sides, but there's having a co-applicants, but also co-chairs can really help bridge some of the areas where there may be differences of opinion. That I think is really valuable. And there was a bit of a tension in our discussions about family carers want to have clear guidance about the role and the remit for family carers, you know, what's expected of them. But also we need to have a bit of flexibility that people may dip in and out of research. And I think it's not a problem, this tension, it's just being aware of it. And that researchers need to be prepared to be challenged, and that's okay. But sometimes, you know, if what happened with us was one of our discussions was we felt the whole document needed to be rewritten and reorganized, and I think it works better, but it was a lot more work for me and Daniel, I have to say. So you've got to allow that time and the resources to do that. If you're really going to listen to feedback, it can mean more work, but hopefully the end result is better. So I'm just going to end with a quote from one of the family carers who was trying to sum up what we were doing and what the message we wanted to get across. So co-production in research involves empowering and respecting family carers by treating them as equal partners and valuing their lived experiences, ensure clear communication, fair compensation, and flexible support to create meaningful co-production that enriches research and drives positive change. And I'll stop sharing now, but there's my email if you want to email and kind of continue this discussion beyond. So thank you. Thank you. So does anyone have any questions or comments or things that they'd like to add? Be great to hear your input.
Thanks so much. And thanks for sticking to the time brilliantly as well. What a rich story and some great lessons with really good examples. I think we probably have a lot of questions and comments. So I think what we'll do, why don't we start with folks who are virtual. If you want to raise your virtual hands, then we can actually say our comments and stuff out loud. And then folks in the room, we can think about our own questions and we'll go second. We'll go after we're on. So who has some, it could be feedback, it could be a question. Anyone have something they would like to ask? I always have questions, so I will go soon if I don't. I see Lee's real hand is up. Go ahead, Lee, and introduce yourself before you start.
Hi, Joanna. I'm a family caregiver, and I've been working on research projects for quite a number of years. I just thank you for such a succinct presentation today. You really hit the key points. I couldn't have said it better. Really well done. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's so nice to hear. I really appreciate that. But if you think of anything after, please do get in contact because we really do want to continue, learning and developing. So thank you.
Nice point, Lee. I think it's interesting to see when another group of people that we don't know at all and don't talk to at all come up with a lot of the same things that we're thinking about. That says something, right? And also, I think the point about succinctness, sometimes we think it's a better presentation if it's really long and we give lots of details, but actually we learned a lot in a short period of time that was super clear. And I think the visuals for people who are looking at the slides were also really helpful. Other comments or questions from people? Joanna's hand is up. Yeah, and then we'll go in the room. So maybe Joanna next soon.
Hi, Joanna, fellow Joanna. Thank you for that incredible presentation. I'm sorry we didn't get to meet in Chicago, but I heard really wonderful things about you, and it's really lovely to meet you virtually. And yeah, thank you for sharing what incredible work you're doing and your perspective on all of this. Yeah, it's very, very impactful. And I think we're in some of the work we're doing at the center around acceptance and commitment training. So it's a partnership model where caregivers and clinicians are delivering this intervention together to other caregivers. I saw a lot of parallels in the ways you were describing how that partnership work happens and all the things that you need to have sort of in place to make it successful, but then also some of the challenges. And we've encountered, I think, similar ones. And we're sort of thinking of where this model might go next, actually thinking about funding and where we'll sort of take this model. And one area that I think we're kind of struggling, and so maybe your thoughts would be really helpful, is we've been able to kind of, I think, support this kind of partnership model in the Azrieli Center, in this really great sort of research world where we have funding or we can apply for funding and have people and do that kind of partnership work really well. And then we had a grant where we were able to give agencies in the community some funding to roll this out within their programs. But then when we think about like sustainability, like how do we get agencies on board to do this over the long term, like deliver this program in partnership, like really, buy into it and then invest in it. I think that's like where it sometimes has fallen apart for us with some groups, like, okay, we've got this, we can make it happen, or we can continue to do it. But where other groups sort of, the idea of having caregivers and clinicians work together over the long term has been a struggle. So I don't know if you have thoughts.
Yeah, well, I would say the same in the UK. Yes, and often that kind of implementation phase is really, really difficult because you're then trying to challenge these big systems and the ways that it's always been done and protecting funding and all of this. So yes, it is difficult. And I think that's why a lot of the family carers we worked with really wanted to take this learning to the services and the commissioners and actually spread it out more widely, because that needs to shift as well. So I don't have I'm afraid, an easy answer to that, just an acknowledgement that I guess you're working on different systems, aren't you? You're trying to change something in the research world, but then you're trying to change it in different worlds, and that can take time. But my feeling is that co-production in general, in kind of mental health more generally, is gradually becoming more accepted and part of the funding application. It's part of the process. So you hope that gradually that will be adopted. But yes, some areas will be slower to embrace it than others.
Thank you. And yeah, really, really appreciate this wonderful presentation and the chance to meet you.
Thank you. Thank you. I know we've had emails, but not actually met, so great.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think all Joannas have glasses and blonde hair. So Sue had a comment from the room, and then maybe Adine, I see your hand is up.
All of the people who are also family caregivers are asking you questions, go figure. But hi, Joanna, wonderful. And I wondered if we were all sitting here in such resonance with your work that we almost didn't have any comments, because that all the principles and the values that you're working with are what Joanna brings to our team. And I think that we walk a lot of the same talk here. So I had one question, and it's kind of along the same lines as Joanna's. And I sort of have two hats that I wear. I'm a social worker and a clinician. I work on mindfulness, and Joanna's long project, looking at mindfulness for caregivers. And so I've been doing that for many, many years alongside Joanna, but I'm also a caregiver of an autistic youth. Question I had, you were saying that it's so much richer when we engage people with lived experience, and we know that, we live it and breathe it, right? I come from a long history of working with self-advocates as co-authors and really including the voice, but I was curious, and kind of similar to what Joanna said, how do we know? You were saying that we know that it's so much richer, and we know that because we live it and love it, but how does that translate? How do we measure the change that that's making out in the world after the research is over, after we've completed our studies, it's been published, we've done our dissemination? I'm just curious. I know it because I live it, and it excites me when people with lived experience are authors and they're not just subjects, right? But what are you seeing? Because you were saying really confidently, we know it makes a difference. What's the measurement?
Yeah, so this is really interesting, really important issue to raise. So we were looking around for evidence, and there was not much with family carers, but there was with other areas of lived experience. And I think that's because perhaps family carers, it's a little bit later, the co-production, so perhaps there aren't so many of the measuring. But also, how do you measure it? It's really, really difficult. Yeah. It is really difficult. But what we found is, certainly in EPATS and the feedback from Positive Family Connections, was that the families we then interviewed, the fact that they knew the program had been co-designed, it felt more meaningful to them, and they were more willing to engage in the material, and they felt more comfortable with the family carer who were facilitating. So I think the evidence is coming, and I think we know it, but we struggle to find some really, really clear, neat kind of quantitative thing at that, because I think it's quite hard to do that. So it was more through the qualitative family carers saying, we valued that, we could hear that because that person was a family carer.
Yeah, that resonates. Yeah. Thank you so much for this amazing work.
Thank you.
It might be interesting after for us to do a bit of brainstorming, even in the session, if there's time, just of a few different metrics or things that we're doing. So Adine, your hand was up before?
It was, and in fact, that was largely addressed. It's lovely to see you again, Jo.
It's lovely to see you too.
So great hearing, your presentation in Chicago as well. It was so valuable at the conference. What I'm wondering, okay, the point that I'm at in our peer mentoring is looking in terms of sustainability, and I know that Joanna's sort of touched on that just in her question before, but looking at part of it, as you mentioned, timetabling, fitting in with caregivers and their schedules and things coming up last minute. And this has become quite a challenge now in terms of working with other caregivers to continue the program as facilitators. And finding, I'd love to know some of your experiences in working around timetables and how you've managed that.
Yeah, thank you. It's lovely to see you again. Really nice. It was so nice to connect at Chicago. So yeah, great to see you. Well, some of the things that we kind of touched on in the presentation was about having backup meetings. So meeting with the family carers who'd missed sessions to kind of update them. A lot of things on emails, but then some people found the lengthy chains of emails quite difficult. Some people wanted to use WhatsApp to talk, and then other family carers didn't. So we had to really ask family carers, how do you want to engage? What's going to help you to engage? And it was quite different for different family carers. And some people wanted evening meetings, some during the day. So, to be honest, as researchers, we had to be very, very flexible. And that was quite difficult sometimes for me because I don't often work in the evening. So it's hard, but it's not insurmountable. But I think it involves, a bit of creativity, and perhaps, there'll be groups of people who want to connect in one way and they do something, and other groups that meet in another way. But I think having the time, this is what we found so difficult, was with the deadline. We hadn't got the scope to then really go with people their preferred meeting times as much as we would have liked. So I don't know that I've answered your question. It is difficult. It is difficult. But we were asking people what will help you, and we will try and be as flexible as we can. I don't know if you've got any other idea. What's your kind of learning from your project? What would you recommend for other?
Well, these actually worked in terms of extending on to the next stage, haven't you, with ACT, with moving from people that were training in ACT to then training to be facilitators to that next stage, and that's been really successful. I'm having a lot of challenges at the moment because it's a really small program, our peer mentoring, the coffee chats, and that's kind of what we're looking at, as people that want to commit to moving on to the next stage.
Yeah. And I think also always having more than you need to begin with, more family carers than you need to begin with. So because you don't know what's going to happen down the line. But I think there is also something about, I don't know, from my own personal experience, there have been things that I've been really passionate about as a parent carer, and as a family carer, and I've kind of given my all to the project, blah, blah. And then actually I've just felt, right, I'm ready to move on. And I think there is something about respecting that, but family carers will get involved for all sorts of different reasons. And there may come a point where actually they need to do something different, and kind of, respecting that as well.
I wonder, I'm going to wait with my comments. Are there other people who have comments or questions in the room or out of the room? Okay, so we'll move our camera, if you don't mind. If you don't mind being camera, go ahead.
Hello, I'm Adeline. I'm a postdoctoral fellow, and I don't work with family carer, but I'm very interested in participatory research, and I'm part of participatory research project. And so thank you very much for your very clear, interesting, and inspiring presentation. And I have a question regarding you spoke about some disagreement that can emerge sometimes between the people. So I wondered if you had
Sorry, we're in a hospital, so there's a code in the back.
Okay. Yeah, I'm struggling to hear a bit. I'm trying.
Okay, so yeah, I wonder if you had any situation in which there were some big disagreement regarding the objectives of the project between the stakeholders, and if you had specific strategies to deal with that, and yeah, what are the strategies to manage these disagreements?
Yeah, so there were some disagreements, but just, differences of opinion about what the focus of the project should be. And actually, I just ended up being a bit of a go-between between the discussions, and people were open to hearing differences of opinion, and it was quite useful because there was some things that the family carers felt so strongly about, and I would keep taking some counter arguments from the researchers, and they were so adamant that actually their viewpoints were taken on board. And I think this is where it was quite helpful that I kind of wore two hats. I could understand both kind of perspectives, but I think if you kind of set the tone for meetings of open-minded, listening, supportive, people can discuss differences. Well, this was our experience. I know that won't always be the case. But yeah, we managed to kind of find a way through. I'm not saying that's always going to be the case at all. And I know there will be some differences of opinion. And I guess having a clear outline in your funding application, sometimes that's your kind of bottom line. Well, this is what we have to do. So if there are some arguments about that, then you can go back to that. Finding evidence to support your, your opinions. But if all family carers are saying something really strongly, you need to listen. So I don't think I've given you an easy answer to that, but I guess it's about ethos and approach and setting the tone, setting the scene, but also recruiting people, the family carers, being really thoughtful about the recruitment, that you want a diversity of opinions, and you want people that will share their experiences and their opinions and are not afraid to do that, but also buy into the point of the research in a way, that there may be compromises along the way for a greater good at the end, for example.
Thank you.
But, okay.
Molly has a question here.
Kind of going off Adeline's question. I mean, I know a lot of the times people are talking a lot about these days, differences in opinions between, or I specifically work with autistic people, so this is kind of a specific to autism, but differences between outlooks between autistic individuals themselves and caregivers of autistic people. When someone's both of those things, do you find like any like let's say you're on a parent board and someone identifies as both, do you find any like specific strategies for how to balance those differing opinions? I mean, I'm sure somewhat similar to what you said about Adeline's question, but yeah.
Yeah, it is difficult. And one of the initial conversations we had was about terminology, which is obviously a really key thing about what language we're using. There were differences of opinion on that as well. But we came up with an agreed definition that everyone was kind of happy with. But yes, when there are differences of opinion that are really difficult to manage, I mean, I'm not saying that it's easy, but I think those initial discussions, like one-to-one with people, to really understand kind of where they're coming from and is this the right project, and sharing with other people experiences and kind of pooling ideas. Again, I don't think there's an easy answer, but I think having those initial discussions with people, you can understand what they're kind of wanting from the research, what they're expecting from the research, and clarifying if there's confusion, but also making clear that it's a kind of safe place for people to bring differences of opinion. But that doesn't mean that all opinions are taken on board and acted on. This was, again, another discussion that we had, is that not all views are welcome. Not everything will be acted on if it's not part of the research project. Probably not clarifying enough, but we can't include everything in a research project. There's often quite a kind of narrow remit of what you're trying to do. but you can highlight things that perhaps it needs to expand out to and consider in the future.
Thanks. So I think Sue in the room had
Yeah.
a follow-up on that, and then maybe I'll make a few comments. And if you're online, can you raise your virtual hand or put something in the chat if you wanted to say something and we haven't seen you? Because we don't see all the faces. Go ahead, Sue.
I'll be so quick. I love the comments that people are making and your approach. And Joanna, I think that you're of this perspective, that when we're dealing with family caregivers, and I say this from both lived experience and as a clinician, having a trauma-informed perspective for the people guiding the research to ensure that the voices, whether they're autistic voices or like whoever the voices in the room are that are working on the project, that there's really the support, like the great question about like when there's difference, that there's going to be a lot of emotions that are like, these are, I mean, you know it, you live it, right? The hot topics that come up and just making sure that we can really handle them. Canadian Centre for Caregiving Excellence, one of our partners, do you know CCCE's work?
No, I don't. But,
Oh, okay, well, Yona will connect you on that one, but they're doing a lot of progressive work in Canada right now, trying to catch up with the rest of the world around caregiving strategy, etc. But they have me sit in as our Azrieli clinician on one of the quarterly meetings with all the caregivers. It's a massive meeting, just to be there in case anybody needs to step outside the room and cry or freak out because it's such hot topics. And so there's that trauma-informed care that is part of the project, you know?
And it's not led by the people running that meeting.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
Sue is not leading that work in any way. They
Yeah.
just decided that they need someone who can, you know, have that hat, and everyone needs to know that that's available, whether it's used or not.
I think that's really helpful, really, and I love the way you summed that up, and actually your answer was far better than what I was trying to get across for the previous question. But yes, I think it is something about that nurturing, holding, safe, but also, trauma informed. So many family carers and people with lived experience have, experienced traumatic, have had traumatic experiences, and we really don't want to be re-traumatizing people, and so that support's really key. Yeah,
I'm just taking a look at the room. I don't see anything in the chat box or on screen, so I'll just make a couple comments and then we'll wrap up. I think you know, stuff that goes on in the room and in the meeting, the transparency of it, but also the changing of it. Like what I heard from what you said is that sometimes those difficult conversations happen as a whole big group, but sometimes some researchers felt comfortable just talking to you about what they're thinking. And some family carers also felt comfortable just talking to you about what they're thinking. So I think it's lovely if we try to set up a space where we can have all that dialogue in the room, but it doesn't always feel like that's the best way for it to go. So that same kind of flexibility. And also, like Molly, your comment about what if you're a parent and you're autistic, or you're a sibling and you're autistic, like we used to be very prescriptive, right? Like you're either a care recipient or you're a caregiver. And actually it's not that way. And it's whether we're talking about, I mean, even in work we're doing in aging and dementia, we've learned that actually, wait a minute, we have these aging caregivers who also are care recipients, and we have people with disabilities who are caregivers. Like it's so, and you find out that that person has this identity that doesn't quite match other people. And then you have to change things. Sometimes I think we don't know it until it comes up, right? Which makes me think again about your point about diversity of who's in your group. And if you've kind of got one person wearing a particular identity and they're the only person in that situation, how does that kind of feel? And we try where we can, especially your point where people come in and out of their role, like to have more than one person, you know, when you can do that, and making sure people feel ready for what can or can't happen. But I think it's nice for us to keep exchanging the ideas, because you know, sometimes your one struggle that you have, you realize other people might have actually the same struggle on the other side of the sea or whatever. And there's kind of just interesting small tweaks sometimes that actually make a very big difference. We probably need lots of people's stories to hear what some of the tweaks are, right? Like you just have one story, you don't know in that situation what to do, but someone else might have had the same thing happen. They did this. We used all of our time. So last word to you, and then I'll say goodbye.
I just wanted to pick up what you said about actually, yeah, getting as much input as possible, because, you know, family carers aren't all the same, absolutely. So there'll be different opinions and different views on what works, but it's that kind of communication and asking and being open, I guess, to that feedback and hearing. So thank you so much for inviting me to join you. It's been really wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks everyone for joining today. So we have contact information for Dr. Griffin, and also we, I think, recorded this.